My story has changed. The narrative I've told myself throughout my life has evolved. But the way it started out was I'm less than.
In many cases, when a trauma takes place or a trauma narrative takes place, we what you're talking about, leaning into it, we start to behave in that pattern and become that because it's familiar.
This is proof and evidence that I'm less than. I'm broken. I'm defective. We started this company, Wonderbelly, and a lot of it is because of the damage I caused during my eating disorder. My eating disorder is part of the Wonderbelly story because of that. I would tell nobody. It was my closest friends and family that knew this about me because it carried a lot of shame.
So you started the company and your personal story wasn't something that you were using yet?
Nobody knew about it.
Wow. LA, Rooted Recovery Stories with the one and only Lucas Kraft. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here too. There's so many things I want to start off with, and I hope that I can get to absolutely everything. I really want to kick off with when you think about introducing all that encompasses what makes you up. What's your leading story about who Lucas Kraft is?
Oh, that's simple question. First thing that comes to mind, and I'm going to be explaining this live and sort of understanding it with you as I explain it, is someone on a journey, on a perpetual journey, in so many different ways. They really try to hold this belief that there is no destination in, anything we do. There's no final point. It's sort of this constant journey. There are points along the way. And that's what I'm here for in work, in life, in my relationships. It's growth, it's development. And I'm constantly sort of exploring who I am in the world, who I am at different times, and understanding. So that journey brings so much exploration and growth and, failures. And so I really see myself sort of, I guess if I was to put a label on it, I guess an explorer is, I
love that. That's truly spoken from someone who has elevated to a place of healing through struggles in life, and either by choice or not by choice, right? That's what we're here to talk about today. And laying the foundation there is so not only important, but I think helpful. So let's talk about the beginning for you. Where did life start out?
So I'm from Los Angeles. I grew up relatively not far away from where we're at right now. My story, I didn't come from a life of, turmoil or hardship. I didn't grow up in that environment on the outside. However, on the inside, I would say that, retrospectively, it was a little different. Like there was a lot of turmoil inside. And it was hard to sort of square that. It was hard to be like, but everything seems fine. Why is it so difficult inside?
But now let me stop you there. So when you say that, I hear in simplistic terms, I go to I can be very science-minded, the nature versus nurture, right? Was it environmental, or is it something that was happening on the inside of you exclusively? So are you saying that this was something that internally it wasn't external stressors, or
No, I hear exactly what you're saying. And I think it's a mixture. So, and I can walk through all of this. So there were things that I picked up on that I internalized. And it was the way I processed those things that I think led to a lot of internal turmoil. And what I mean by that, and I can walk through like a couple points, my story has changed. The narrative I've told myself throughout my life has evolved. But the way it started out was I'm less than. And
where'd you get that first message?
There were a lot of different points that I picked up on that I read as this is proof and evidence that I'm less than. I'm broken. I'm defective. Something wrong with me. And those points started when I really look back at when I was 5 years old. When I was 5 years old, 5 or 6, somewhere in that diagnosed with ADD. And at the time, very early 90s, there was almost like this heightened hysteria around ADD where it wasn't looked at as like, actually, now that we look at it, a lot of people, it's very normal. Mm-hmm. It's a very normal thing. But at the time, it was like, Lucas really needs extra attention. He has ADD. We need to figure out what this is. We need to fix it. So at a very young age, I was put on medication, by the advice of the school that I was going to. It was like, Lucas, needs a little extra help. So, I was put on pretty heavy Adderall or Ritalin, whatever it was at the time, at a very young age. That right there was a big signal to me that as I am naturally isn't correct. Mm-hmm. I need something. The big thing was I need something outside of myself to fix me and make me acceptable, right? Yeah. Something worth entering into the world. Because as it wasn't good enough. So that was a big thing. And then, hit a couple stumbling blocks along the way at a very young age. In first grade, I got held back. And I was the only one in my grade to get held back. And I stayed at the same school, which was difficult. Seeing all of the kids that I went to kindergarten and spent that first grade with go on. And I'm left back. So I'm like, okay, there's another point of validation that looks like all the kids in that grade were right. Lucas didn't make it. Lucas, something's wrong. I needed, throughout my youth, tutors, and I went to therapy at a young age. So I need a lot of help. And I also want to say all of this, that I don't hold any resentments against anybody about any of that. I don't point fault at anybody. Everybody was trying to do what they thought was right. And I don't know what the right path where I would have, I may have found other things to pick up on to build this narrative. Mm-hmm. But I truly believe everybody involved, the school, my parents, they were doing what they thought was best, what they were advised to do to give me the best life that they thought I could have. But, unfortunately, I was picking up on these signals and building this narrative that I'm not good enough. And I also come from a family of really high achievers. And so it was hard for me not to compare myself to them as well, because I wasn't just normal. I felt actually less than. I wasn't on the same trajectory as them. And it was clear to me. It felt really clear to like people around me who knew my family. I was like, I feel like a little bit of a skid mark in my family. I built that narrative, and it formed a lot of how my thoughts grew. I really leaned into it. I sort of accepted I'm the screw up, I'm the mess up.
When you say you leaned into it, I think sometimes when people talk about trauma, and this is, traumatic thinking can be a message that we get that's negative towards us, right. Period, right? And it's like Chinese water torture that goes on and on and on. In many cases, when a trauma takes place or a trauma narrative takes place, we what you're talking about, leaning into it, we start to behave in that pattern and become that because it's familiar. Would you say that was what happened for you?
It's the identity I knew, but I actually leaned into it because I started to use it to my advantage. I leaned into it because I was like, wow, actually nobody really expects that much from me. Everyone sort of expects me to screw up, mess up, not do as well. I can get away with getting C's. I can get into trouble easier. Everyone's like, oh, well, that's just Lucas. I can disappoint people and it's sort of expected. And I can get away with that a little easier. And so it gave me excuses to be a worse version of myself than maybe I could have been. At the same time, I'm building a brain that's telling me, reinforcing a lot of these thoughts. So I've created this brain, or that's feeding me a lot of really mean thoughts. You're less than, working against me. Eventually I develop a lot of anxiety, and as I got older, my brain's developing, get into high school, around my teens, I have this brain, even though I'm leaning into this, that's really mean to me. It doesn't like me. It loves telling me scary stories, fantastic at it, really loves scaring me. And I really don't like being in there. It's scary. It's mean. I don't like hanging out in there. I want to find a way to not have to spend so much time with this brain, because it's like walking around. Who'd want to walk around everywhere with a bully right next to you?
Right. Basically.
And so, I had a lot of discomfort just internally that I was walking around with. None of this understanding really was occurring in the front of my brain. It was just always like this, like, I don't get it. Why am I always sort of uncomfortable? And so that's sort of like on a macro view, there's we all have so many experiences. So
sure.
I'm really just giving a broad stroke, but like macro view, that's sort of how I see the formation of my psyche early on, and what led to a lot of decision making and choices.
So when referring to decision making and choices, what there was a real pivot in your life at the age of 15, but what take us there, because I don't really know what leading up to it.
Yeah.
I don't know that story yet.
So it's interesting. I think about it a lot. It's, I sought relief from a very young age without realizing it. I was sort of a chronic daydreamer. In elementary school, I remember I looked forward to carpool and driving to school, because it gave me this time that I could just stare out the window and get lost in a fantasy, in a daydream. I really looked forward to that. And I didn't realize until later on, I was really trying to escape. Reality was difficult for me to handle. And that was an escape, and it worked for a while. But as I got older, a lot of these thoughts, a lot of the things going on, I'm on medication my entire life. So I'm dealing with fluctuating brain chemistry. As I'm getting older, that daydreaming, it's not quite cutting it. It's not giving me the relief from this brain that's starting to get louder that I needed. So I started finding these other, tools, these other coping mechanisms. And one was eating. I also found, at a young age, I started to discover drinking and, smoking weed as California and young kid. That's sort of just par for the course. And these provided some relief. But eating, I also realized, like, when I ate food I loved, I sort of had this momentary almost blackout. I would go into this meditative state where all my brain's focus would be on the dopamine being released from the enjoyment of this food. But it was fleeting, and I didn't want it to stop. So it typically would lead me to eat a lot so I could extend it as much as possible. However, it would always follow by the second I was full or whatever, I was left with the same brain at the end of it. But I was also left with a new kind of discomfort, a physical discomfort. I was full. I didn't feel good. And a panic would typically set in, because I also had a very strong belief that if I wasn't physically attractive, I would be unlovable. I already felt somewhat unlovable, and, raised with this belief that, I was raised on Disney movies, that the messaging is, it's not what matters on the outside, it's what matters on the inside. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have great insides. I didn't think what was on the inside was lovable. So I was like, ooh, that doesn't really apply to me. So actually for me, I think what matters is what's on the outside. I might be able to control that. And if I can control that, then maybe people will love me. So that was a panic that would set in, is, I've eaten too much. Okay, I got this fleeting relief, but now I'm physically uncomfortable. And now I'm panicking, because am I setting myself up to be unlovable? Which is a big thing to suddenly just take on. So I'd need relief from that, and I'd go and throw up.
So let me ask you real quick, because I'm from the South. All right. So I come from a long line of weight fluctuators. We eat for absolutely every event death, marriage, birthday, whatever, right? Like eating is everything. So much of what you're describing about relationship with food and numbing, using it to numb, I have the same story. And I think a lot of people from the South can relate to that as well.
I think
because
comfort
it's
food
so
is definitely
it's so commonplace.
Right.
And so, but you grew up here where the land of, I mean, like, I don't know what it was like when you were a kid, but right now, beautiful people everywhere, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah. It was totally reinforced. The values that, you know, in the culture, growing up in Los Angeles and Hollywood, the values are very much placed on surface level presentation and how you're perceived, what's on the outside, how much people love you, fans, all that. That is success here. That leads to success. And that's what's so valued here. And, you know, I'm speaking very generally, but at least the world that I was seeing, that's what I was reading from it. Again, it was a thing of how I was processing things.
Right.
And that's how I was processing is, oh, wow, that's extremely valuable.
Well, and I think that an interesting dynamic to point out is that you mentioned being raised on Disney movies. And to a certain extent, I was too. At a certain point, I wasn't allowed to watch them as a kid, but when I was a teenager, I started watching them. Anyway, my statement / question, though, or observation, is that, you know, talking about the Disney movies and shows placing emphasis on the importance of what's on the inside and what have you, but then you're living in a place where what the values that people are actually living out is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
Even in, I mean, like, I'll be honest, because I come out here all the time. Even in the day and age right now where we are a much more inclusive society than I think ever from a physical standpoint, embracing people who with larger bodies and different things like that. In Los Angeles, it's still like so different than everywhere else. So, you know, you especially take, this is for I think for all humans, but for kids, you can say something to a kid 1,000,000 times, but what they're actually going to pay attention to and internalize is what behavior is being modeled before them.
100%. Yeah.
So it only makes sense that this is the message, the message that you were getting. How did you, I feel like most people I talk to that were bulimic, like that in and of itself was modeled for them at some point. Like, did you just on your own, like
figure it out? Yeah. So yes. And it took me a really long time to figure out that it was actually an eating disorder. What it was, I didn't realize it. Initially, I thought I'd figured out a life hack. I was proud of myself. I thought I'd figured, oh my God, it's a win-win-win. I can eat all I want and I don't face any of the consequences. And I was sort of like, I think I might have just figured something out that, you know, is a tool that I will always have. And I had this weird internal, not weird, but like I had this internal rationalization. Once I remember the day I figured it out. I also remember the day I found out that it was bulimia, because I shared it very proudly with a friend. I was like, well, you know, because I was introduced, I realized this was a solution because my teens, I'd heard the term boot and rally as like a thing in partying, where you party too much and you throw up and you can keep going, which I'd only become, but I was like, that seems like that could work for food. I was like, that could work for food. So I sort of put two and two together, because to me, that wasn't an eating disorder. And then also I remember telling a friend, like, you know, you can do this. And he was like, that is bulimia. And it dawned on me, I guess, yeah, technically it is. But the way I rationalized it is I wasn't doing it to get in my head. I was like, I'm not doing it to get skinny. I'm just doing it to prevent myself from getting fat. So it's not an eating disorder. And I had such little, as a man, never heard of another man having an eating disorder. So there was even some denial in the fact that I was like, do I even qualify? And then beyond that, I was like, but I don't really, no information has ever been presented to me. I've got these very singular, limited examples of what eating disorders look like. And it's typically portrayed by media as, just a young woman in a bathroom stall. And that's basically it. And you don't see much. It's usually a sound effect. And that's what an eating disorder is portrayed as. And I'm like, no, I don't match that. I'm like, yeah, I sort of do, but now that's different. I'm not like that. So it took a while until I finally realized, oh, wow, this has gotten out of hand and I can't stop. I actually think that there is some legitimacy to this being categorized as an eating disorder, when all along it was from the day one. But yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
There probably was a feeling of I'm clever, or I literally thought of it as life hack. So I was like, ooh, I've figured out a loophole. I remember it happened at a Chipotle. I was with friends and I had just basically inhaled an entire burrito, but I still wanted more because I was craving that sort of momentary release of dopamine that I was getting from enjoying the food. I realized, well, I feel full. I physically don't know if I can handle more, but I still want more. What if I basically emptied it out? I could do it again. And I remember realizing, wait, that might work. And I tried it and it did. I could have another burrito. And I was like, did I just figure it out? Yeah, that process wasn't easy, but I'm willing to go through that to get the relief, because again, sort of internally torturing myself with these scary, mean thoughts. I'm pretty desperate to get relief.
So what's worse, if you're the internal torture that you've been living with? I'm not saying what's actually worse at the moment. I have to ask, in your mind, you're processing what is worse, the torture that you've been experiencing internally, or the momentary torture that you have to go through in order to feel that sense of ease. Well,
clearly for me, it was the value was the momentary torture was a easy trade-off to get the pleasure I just so desperately wanted to have basically a breather.
So this makes all the sense in the world to me. I want to touch on really quick your perception at the moment. And I don't think it's all that different now, even though some wonderful organizations, NEDA and, are doing some great visibility work, and our culture still has so much farther to go with representation and stigma, breaking stigma in the realms of everything with mental health, but especially on the men's side and how it comes to eating disorders. If you were to think about back then, and even now, my gosh, when we talk about disordered eating for men, and you change that narrative just a little bit, your mind goes to, mine does anyway, I can't speak for you. The conversation is really around counting calories, cutting fat, restricting, not necessarily anorexia nervosa or bulimia, right? We don't hear about that. You might.
So I totally agree. And I've currently spending a lot of time talking about my experience with eating disorders. Recently, my company, Wonderbelly, partnered with NEDA, and I've been sharing a lot about it. So I've been really diving into the world of specifically men suffering from eating disorders because of how sort of hidden away it is. eating disorders in general are sort of tucked away. And we can get into, that and statistics and all that. Growing up, zero information about eating disorders, zero about men. Up until I sort of got into recovery, that was the first time I had seen another man who admitted to having an eating disorder. Not once did it cross my path. And since then, outside of recovery, I didn't hear anything about it. But, in the past 2 years, I've made a shift. So like we started this company, Wonderbelly, and a lot of it is because the damage I caused during my eating disorder. And I needed digestive medicine, and Wonderbelly was created out of that need for certain types of digestive medicine. But it's a part of my eating disorder is part of the Wonderbelly story because of that. And so when we started Wonderbelly, it became this thing that I would tell nobody. It was my closest friends and family that knew this about me because it carried a lot of shame.
So you started the company and your personal story wasn't something that you were using yet.
Nobody knew about it.
Wow.
And it became, and I was, my brother was my co-founder. We had a lot of conversations of, do I bring this into the fold? Because it felt really hollow. Like the story felt incomplete. Story felt like Wonderbelly came out of nowhere. And I was like, but there's meaning and there's actually validity. I've never heard another man experiencing, like I really don't hear this. It actually might really benefit. If Wonderbelly goes, well, there's a platform and the story can get out a little bit more, that would really help people. It would have helped me. And so we decided, okay, we'll include it in the story. And so I had to get comfortable real fast telling people something that I had while I was in, my bulimia, nobody knew. I wouldn't let, and that was, being a man actually made it unbelievably easy to hide. Surprisingly, was nobody, even when the signs were really clear, nobody suspected anything. I was so far off the radar of anybody, but then I had recovery. So my wife knows, my family, my brother, that's about it. And then we start this company and we start talking to different business partners, investors, and I'm starting to tell complete strangers this like deep, dark secret. And I have to get really comfortable with it. It was super therapeutic, but in this process, I think the first or second time I did it, it became clear I needed to do it because after one of those calls, I got an email from a personal email address. And it was one of the people that was on this Zoom call, like one of the several faces. Mm-hmm. And they emailed me separately from their personal saying, hi, I've never heard another man share their experience with an eating disorder. I've never shared this with anybody, but I'm currently struggling with an eating disorder. And like thanked me. And like, boom, for me, that was like, well, that first off, that happened really fast. And second off, I was like, I'm obligated now to do this. It's no longer like, yeah, I guess it's part of the story. It's no longer for me. This is now I'm obligated to do this. And that has happened multiple times since. And so now it's become aware, wow, there's a lot of people out there struggling.
Absolutely.
Silently.
Specifically when talking about the umbrella term for anorexia and bulimia, I think anorexia tends to go so with men, like you said, it's so easily flies under the radar. In many cases, it doesn't manifest in. For instance, with cisgender women, a lot of times eating disorder with anorexia nervosa shows up with a much more skeletal frame, right? And that's not always the case with men. It is the problematic and unhealthy disordered eating is happening, but it's not always the quite as low of the weight and BMI when it comes to, you know, the body composition. So it looks different, and one of the reasons why it goes much more undetected. Just speaking about anorexia nervosa, then we go to bulimia. One of the things that fascinates me so much is the stigma behind that specific type of eating disorder and cisgender men, because, and actually, I don't know the reason why it is. I really don't know the reason why. But the numbers are underreported.
Oh my God, yeah.
There's, and one of the reasons why I know, because I work for I would say one of the Amazons of the behavioral health treatment world. We have many treatment facilities across the country. Only one of them treats eating disorders. So when you have people come in for all these other types of things for residential treatment, if they've got an active eating disorder, you've got to refer them out ethically.
Right.
So I know, because I see the numbers of how many men, especially straight men,
right,
that have bulimia, that have got to go to one of very few. There aren't very many treatment centers that treat men with eating disorders in our country.
And they're not really, I just want to preface, I'm not an expert by any means. And I've spent a lot of time sort of in this world absorbing, talking to a lot of people who are experts and gathering information through that. And, you know, with, interestingly enough, it's the numbers it looks like the numbers have grown in terms of population of men experiencing eating disorders, bulimia, anorexia. They haven't. It's just the number of people willing to talk about it has actually grown. It's still dramatically underreported, but as you know, my own experience, I feared emasculation. I feared alienation, shame. I feared, nobody could know. I would be outcasted.
That's the thing. Okay. So, and I wanted you to go there and say that. But I feel like there is a feminine quality attributed to bulimia, where it's not attributed the same level to anorexia, because anorexia can be written off as just cutting weight, doing whatever.
We assign gender roles, and we definitely, and only recently in the past, decade or two, we've started to really understand how gender roles have sort of negatively affected us, and how it's not, we've abided by them. And when I was growing up, I definitely thought, okay, men play this role, women play this role. Women care more about looks, men don't. And if you're that's a feminine trait. These are feminine traits over here in this bucket. These are masculine traits. They don't mix. There's no crossover. It's that. And that's just not the case. There is no line. And I think we've made a lot of progress in just understanding gender as it is on a spectrum, and that there is no one trait that is isolated to one thing. But I didn't understand that, and it's still so like we haven't broken out of it. We're just sort of people are starting to understand it a little bit more.
I want to talk just really quick, because I don't want to skim over this. I think that it's equally as important to talk about the struggle as it is the solution, because so many people that tune into our show, and just in general, when we're telling our story, like when I'm struggling and sick, I don't connect with your solution. I cannot connect with your struggle. So when talking about that and thinking back to, you were talking about being going undetected so much more easily. Well, when we're talking about going undetected, what are those the symptoms that you're talking about? What was going through your head? Because there's a lot that goes into an active bulimia and eating disorder when you're eating, the process that you have to go through. So if you look back and think to the common themes that would go through your head of processes you had to make sure were in place.
Oh yeah.
The fears that what specific fears, were they that were
So there was a lot, and I tend to not go into specifics because I don't want to inadvertently teach anybody any tactics. Sure. But I had a lot of things in my back pocket, things that gave me assurances and put in place. The fears was nobody can find out. I don't know how I'd be able to sort of recover from somebody finding that out and me being labeled and ostracized. If it was, somebody I was close with, like I couldn't let them find out because I also felt like I was deceiving people. I was hiding a part of myself. I was lying to people. I was doing something sneaky and deceiving. And whether I knew it at the time or not, it hurt me to keep doing that and to sort of hide that away. I'd also feel so much shame, not beforehand, but right after. And I'd feel embarrassed and shameful. Mm-hmm. And it took me, it took me a really long time to even understand it. 'Cause I understood addiction. I understood how that could affect your brain. And I understood the futility in people just saying, like, why don't you just stop? Like I understood how addiction can sort of consume a brain and make stopping. So I couldn't understand it with eating disorders. And I had it. I didn't understand why I couldn't just stop.
Well, so many people don't understand how eating disorders are an addiction. It's a behavioral addiction. What exactly. is a behavioral addiction?
I was so confused for so long. It was like, well, like on paper, what I'm putting myself through, that's not enjoyable. Like, again, looking at substances, looking at addiction, it's a pretty direct link between me, how I'm feeling, and then how I'm feeling when, you're on a drug or something. Mm-hmm. You feel great. It's not too much downside. You don't have to put your body through a lot. It's, not too much downside. That's just not the case.
It feels that way.
In that micro moment, but it was like, most people don't have to struggle to not throw up. That's a pretty easy thing to avoid in life. Why am I unable to not stop myself? And later on, I understood it.
Well, let me ask you, okay, so there was a moment where you go, I finally found the solution. I finally found the key, I think. At what point did that stop feeling like it was the solution? And then you're going, oh crap, I need something else this isn't doing it for me alone.
So like everything, it was solution, and I didn't see it as a problem. And then it sort of started to be both at once, where it was like, okay, it's a problem, but it's the only solution I have. So I don't really have a better option to get what I want, to get the peace of mind, to get, what I thought was, self-security and control. And then, health issues started to really kick in. Then it really started to interrupt my life, and cause me more problems. Later on in life, in my mid-20s, I was ending up in the ER. And even then, like you're talking about, treatment centers sort of struggle with men with eating disorders. The doctors didn't even, that I was going to the ER, had no, I was going with massive damage to my esophagus and parts of my digestive system, all pretty much pointing to, this looks like he's chronic throwing up and purging. But it didn't ever, they were like, we're just not sure. Could be really intense GERD. Mm-hmm. Not once asking, hey, this actually looks like you may be throwing up a lot. Is that possible? Right. Didn't once occur. So I was able to fly under the radar because it's just, but for sorry, I tangented.
No, it's fine, because that was a really good point. But you're dealing with coping with, an unhealthy coping mechanism to deal with pain, and you're numbing out.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It wasn't helping you.
So yeah, so a solution to the problem. So then it became just a problem. And actually, there was a moment where I'm in this relationship with my girlfriend, who is actually now my wife, and it's gotten to a point where I'm realizing this is the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And I do have this sense inside of me that I'm like, this is a big part of me that I feel almost like unfaithful in a way, that I'm sneaking off and doing this act, and I'm hiding something from her. And I have this thing that I'm hiding. And I couldn't really imagine, okay, if I'm going to marry this person and live with them, this is a lot of energy I'm putting into hiding this thing that's not really bringing me the pleasure it once did. And so I was like, I think I just need to let her know that this is something I struggle with. And so I let her know. It wasn't easy, and I talk about this a lot, but I took a moment of I just took a step forward and said it. I didn't want to, but I stopped thinking about how I didn't want to. And I was just like, just get it out. And once it's out, we'll see what happens. So I was like, hey, I just need to say one thing real quick. I am, I might be, and I sheepishly danced around it to downplay it. I was like, I've struggled a little bit with bulimia and whatever, when in reality it was like once or twice a day I was acting on my bulimia at that point. And I'm extremely fortunate because she said, everything you'd ever want to hear from somebody you trust and you're confiding in is, I'm really sorry to hear that, and thank you for telling me, but we're going to do something about this, and we're going to figure this out. This isn't something that's just going to be like, oh, hope it works out. We're going to figure this out. Treatment, whatever you need, we're going to. And that started me. It was, and this is where I talk about, so it got into this point of problem. And I was really fortunate that without realizing it, I sought help. I spoke up, and just by doing that, I started on the road to recovery.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love talking about how so many people think that asking for help or it's just such a scary thing, that you're signing some type of contract, once you admit that you have a problem. But the fact of the matter is you're always in the driver's seat, but all it takes is telling one person that actually cares about you, that you're struggling. And it can set the wheels in motion of changing your life for the better. And that's such a heavy lift sometimes, though. It feels like it, of just ripping the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
What did healing look like for you?
So it wasn't easy. One of the really interesting things and about having an eating disorder is it's not black or white. It's not abstinence where recovery is just complete detachment from what it was that was the problem, because it's food. You need food. And I'll go back to addiction. It's recovery is black or white. You're either using whatever it is that substance, alcohol, you're either using it or you're not.
Right.
So it's pretty clear, pretty cut and dry. With eating disorders, you do have to engage in the thing that is the source of your problem on a daily basis. Abstinence in itself is actually another eating disorder.
Yeah.
And so it was really difficult. And it wasn't quick. The recovery, the healing, there were a lot of relapses, a lot of slip ups. Something I always like to talk about, because, and in recovery, we talk about progress, not perfection. I think that's really important, because it's really easy to beat yourself up and sort of just throw in the towel. But it took me a while to finally get time under my belt between my last purge and never purging.
Yeah.
And yeah.
What were some of the tools, right? Like people, I've heard some people say before that they were just like, I had a wake up call and I was committed enough. For many people that struggle with eating disorders, it takes a little bit more support than that. It's of therapeutic intervention.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools out there, and for me, it's whatever, works for you and whatever you're willing to commit to. I used 12-step program initially, and for the most part, I'm a big believer. I'm also sober, so I've already had been introduced to that, and it worked really well. And so I applied the 12-step program, and for me, what that really meant was, of course, working the 12 steps, but community support, accountability. I always go back to me speaking up at that moment with my wife, and how sort of repeating that action throughout recovery for me keeps me farther and farther away from my disorder. The more I speak up about it, even right now, this is recovery for me. This is treatment for me. Because I'm putting it out in the world. It's no longer this thing that I'm toiling with internally by myself, putting it out in the world, making myself accountable, but sharing it with others, having a support system, having people I can connect with about it, being of service to them, all of that stuff. For me, that's the greatest tool to have. There were other things, of course, little like techniques that I'd sort of picked up, especially early on, journaling, really like when those urges came up, that discomfort that triggered this thought of, I should just go into the, pantry right now. Like discomfort discomfort equaled open up the pantry. When the discomfort arose, it was retraining what is the action that follows. And at the very beginning, it was either pick up the phone, call somebody, or write down what that discomfort looks like. And usually it took a lot of power away from that discomfort.
Yeah.
But it was replacing that sort of what my solution was. It was finding a new solution that wasn't also a problem. And there's a lot of different techniques. I also went to therapy. I worked hard for it, but I stopped going to the ER. I stopped feeling like I was deceiving everyone. I actually started getting really comfortable with myself because I started owning up to who I am. And I started living a better life. So in a way, and also it led to me creating this company in a way, that sort of darkness where my eating disorder had me, I never realized. It always felt like that darkness would last forever. I never realized that darkness would actually be the birthplace to some of the greatest things in my life, and lead through recovery.
Man, I can relate to that so freaking much. I want to ask you, there are a bunch of, I think, misnomers or lies that we believe about if we're ever found out, what's going to be taken from our life, whether it's something that we think we already have or the potential that's going to be taken from us, whether it's reputation, people's respect, people's loyalty, people's love, all those things, right? So the self-perpetuating shame is this belief about these lies that we think about being found out.
Right.
For you, what did that look like pre-recovery versus post-recovery in finding out the vast difference between those two things?
What would happen if...
Yeah.
Well, so, the fear of alienation, fear of, what if my friends found out? They would look at me different. They wouldn't want to spend time around me. They would be disgusted. All these things. That was a fear. I would say actually one of the biggest driving fears was somebody might tell somebody, and this might get taken away from me. And I don't have another solution for my discomfort. I don't know what I would do in that. I can't stand the discomfort. That scares me too much. I can't let go of this thing that I depend on. That's where the compulsion comes in. That's where, for a long time, I didn't understand, why can't I just stop? Well, that's why I couldn't stop. is because I couldn't stand the discomfort I was in. That it kept driving me back to it. And so that was I think the biggest fear of what if I told somebody they might take it away. Then it slowly started to get away to the point where I was like, I actually do want somebody to take it away from me. But I still don't know how I could replace it, and I'm too afraid. Then the flip side, once I started telling people, the reward was so great and so unimaginable. I did not realize
what didn't happen that you thought was going to happen?
Alienation. It's actually really funny. So when I started talking about it publicly because of the company, I was talking about it in like Zoom meetings and before Wonderbelly had launched. And I started getting more comfortable, and it started to become something that I could say easily without sort of a lump in my throat and a lot of, thinking after, oh my God, did I just embarrass myself? Am I doing the wrong thing? Am I, start getting more comfortable. And then, so we get to this point with Wonderbelly where we're going to launch, and we actually have some pretty big articles coming out alongside our launch. And in the articles, I talk about my story. It's about to become very public. This deep secret that I've always had. And I realized, oh my God, I still haven't even told my friends. And if I don't tell them, they're going to find out through an article a very personal detail about me that I was willing to tell, like, strangers, but not them, because I still was afraid.
Right.
Without realizing it. So literally the day before launch, I called all my friends who've known me for years and I trust and who love me and I love them, and they're amazing people. And I called them and I was like, hey, sort of like, I probably should have told you this when I was starting to tell people, but it was just so embedded in me not to tell people that, but I struggled with bulimia. Some were not, surprised, but everyone received it. Like, so sorry to hear that. I'm so happy you were able to figure it out. Other than that, zero changes in my relationships with them.
Yeah.
So, some of my childhood friends were like, yeah, you didn't hide it as well as you thought you did. Which I was like, oh, wow. But it had no effect on the people that I cared about and who cared about me.
Isn't it? It's so interesting to me that I love that you outlined this dynamic of telling strangers first and then telling people closer to you, but it was harder to tell the people closer to you. And I would wager to say that the reason why is the people close to you are the ones that were involved, that through action you were, and forgive me if this is reaching, but lying to through behavior, right? Omitting.
Yeah.
Right. Living a norm, not being open, right? Not living a norm, living a behavior that you were keeping secret that they were adjacent to, but you never, do you know what I mean? Like that narrative is something you support.
I totally know what you mean.
So you're telling them about years of this part of you that you were shielding from them and also acting like that wasn't who,
right?
You know what I mean?
So that definitely is, a part of that sort of like, I did have this feeling of I need to apologize to them for not saying anything that entire time, because like there is this feeling of like, which is, this isn't the correct appraisal of the situation, but it's how I sort of felt was I was lying to them about who they were friends with. Mm-hmm. They didn't know who they were. And now that I'm telling them, will they reconsider? Because I've lied to them but what else maybe have I not told them about myself?
Exactly.
Which again, that's not how they think about it.
It didn't play out that way because it's the disease speaking.
The disease, and it also tells me people are thinking about me a lot more than they actually.
You mean less? A lot less. Than,
well, it's telling me that they're thinking.
Oh,
about me.
right. Yes.
Like it makes me think that people are thinking about me a lot.
Right.
But in reality, people are thinking about themselves just as they're probably thinking about me the same way. Like thinking about it just as much as I am. But yeah, it was. I've gotten a lot more. I've gotten really comfortable with it, and it's given me a lot of strength, especially their reactions. And there is sort of this like natural selection of, if they didn't react well, is that a friendship
exactly
that I wanted? If they were like, ew, that's do I want that in my life? The fear, or this like going into the unknown, I think it was actually powered by in a way empathy. Is that I in sort of selfishness, but like I would want that from someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have used that. And like it was blind faith and going out there hoping that maybe I'm right, that somebody else who's like me would hear it and get a little strength from it, a little hope. It sort of was me transporting myself into my 15-year-old body, imagining, what if somebody back then really sort of forcefully came out and said, yeah, I experienced this. There's a path. There's a different way to sort of solve the problem. I don't know if that would have changed the direction I was on at that, but maybe I could have found recovery sooner. Maybe it would have changed how I thought about it. But it definitely came out of this, like, that if that is the outcome of this, that so outweighs any fears that I have, because so much of my recovery in general is thinking outwardly, thinking about how maybe I could add to somebody else's life, rather than thinking, how can I just constantly add to my life?
What do you think, like, to that person who is 15 years old tuning in right now versus the person, full-grown man who's 25,
right,
who's been struggling for however many years in silence with this same thing? What would you say to them?
Well, being insulted, it's I wouldn't say what they're missing is what they're getting is a much stronger, I mean, some people refer to it as a disease, much stronger disorder, but that is what feeds the eating disorder, is keeping you scared, keeping you lonely, keeping you dependent on it. And so, but what I would say is that I understand how scary and difficult it is. I understand the apprehension to take a leap towards letting it go and hoping you grab onto something that is either better or answers the scary question that is answering. It's not easy, and it might not happen right away, but I encourage anybody to just take little steps towards it. The biggest thing for me was I would say it took about 1.5, maybe 2 seconds to just say really quickly out loud to somebody I trusted, sort of telling myself. And that sort of opened the door for me. And those 2 seconds it's a small but enormous step. I understand how big and how scary that is. But if you're at the point that I was, where it was a problem, and you realize that, because you do need to be ready, I would really try to take those 2 seconds and find somebody and just say it out loud, get it out there. Mm-hmm. and maybe the door's open to sort of what, I need to find a better, less cliche way of saying this, but a better way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cliche or not, a better way is certainly what you found, and something that not only that in your personal life and healing journey, but as we talked about, you had so much of your physical body that had to, as a consequence from, you know, having that active eating disorder for so many years, that had to heal and repair itself. And your gut being the primary one, right? So let's talk a little bit about what prompted you to create Wonderbelly and what it does.
100%. So what happened, you know, after and I don't like to say I recovered as if it's past tense and it was a finite experience that I recovered from eating disorder, because I consider recovery sort of a constant. Every day is another step in recovery. And, you know, I have to be vigilant to make sure that, you know, I don't fall back into old habits. So it is a constant thing. But when I did finally, you know, recover from using my eating disorder as a tool, I was left with damage to my digestive system. Why I was going to the ER, it was because I was causing permanent damage to my esophagus, to my stomach. And the result left me with conditions that made me reliant on medicines that manage symptoms for me. And I was reliant on things like antacids on a daily basis. I needed them at that point. And at a really young age, I'm using, you know, these antacids day in, day out, and they were really effective and they worked really well, and they got me through several years because these conditions weren't going away. But in 2020, one of the medications I was taking was called Zantac. It had to be recalled because there were signs that it potentially contained a carcinogenic ingredient. I saw that, and it really, you know, opened my eyes to thinking, okay, I never really thought about, you know, what goes into my medicine. And so I think about it with food. I think about it with, you know, even skincare, but I never really paid attention. And, I started reconsidering, like, there's certain things I want in my medicine that I'm not getting, and certain ingredients, certain values. You see non-GMO in food, you see it but you don't see a lot of those kind of certifications and things in medicine. So I looked for medicine that had these different sort of certifications, different values, and they didn't really exist. And so it became clear, if I wanted what I wanted, I might have to actually make it myself. But was that even possible? So I brought my brother in, and we connected with, you know, pharmaceutical scientists and gastroenterologists, and it became very clear, yeah, this is something that people could use. And that's sort of how Wonderbelly started. So we created, you know, an antacid that's just as effective, but we're non-GMO, we're clean label certified, vegan, it's gluten-free, dairy-free, and we avoid using a lot of, you know, artificial additives. But and then we also put it in sustainable packaging, and there was a lot of stuff that was like, we could really do some good here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
And seeing such success, you launched, what did you say, 16 months ago?
Yeah, so we launched about 18 months ago. I don't even know what year it is at this point, but yeah, we launched about 18 months ago. And it was another one of those moments where I, you know, walked out hoping that other people saw what I saw, and the reaction was overwhelming. Like, it was fantastic. Became clear I wasn't alone in that either. In wanting that product. So we've grown really fast, and people really love it. And so I just couldn't be more fulfilled and happy to see that, you know, it's actually making an impact.
Awesome. I got really excited because I think the packaging is so cool. And the immediate one that I'm excited to try, because I do have to take antacids kind of regularly, is the fruity cereal, which I'm assuming tastes like all the fruity cereal we grew up on. But yeah, like it's cool bottle. Anyway, I'm excited to try it. Is it like all the stores that we would regularly go to buy our normal stuff anyway?
Yeah. So it's at Target nationwide. And we're in a lot of, regional grocers. So here in LA, we're in Ralph's, we're in Erewhon, we're in Kroger, and then East Coast, you're likely to find it in your regional grocer, and same Midwest and the South. And so, yeah, we've grown really fast.
Awesome.
And it's really, really sort of mind blowing to walk into one of these places and see Wonderbelly and be like, that was once just an idea.
Right.
Why is it on that shelf? Yeah, so we have a lot of really fun slogans. Yeah, so Let's Kick Acid is one. Live life when you're fullest. We have a lot of really fun little things that we like to play around with, because like one of the things that Wonderbelly really wants to bring to the table is like relief should be enjoyable, and we really want the brand to represent sort of the levity and joy that life can bring when you're not experiencing symptoms like heartburn, acid ingestion. We really want to encompass that. Because a lot of the branding in the pharmaceutical aisle, it's cold and sterile and corporate, and to me that's like, but medicine, and it should bring relief, it should be happy, it should be human. And so that's what we really try to do with the company.
I love it. It's got like the little emojis, or I don't know, a little
little cartoon characters.
Yeah, totally. This is current. So yeah, the ADD in me kicked in. I couldn't find the part that says, but I see. We appreciate you and think you kick acid. That's awesome. Yeah. Man, well, this is great. Congratulations on the company. I can't wait to try this myself.
Oh, thank you so much.
When you hit that point in your life where, God, I'm old, because I'm like, I can't wait to try this new antacid. But it's the truth. And yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your honesty and vulnerability, and just being willing to share your story. You, as we talked about, and I know, so impactful, so necessary. I'm excited for this episode to release. So thank you for allowing us to be a platform to carry this message.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate the opportunity. And as I said, selfishly, I get so much out of it in my recovery. And so just being able to share my story. So thank you.
Awesome. You got it. With that, I'll remind each and every one of you that it's never too late to start loving yourself, and you're always only one decision away from a completely different life.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.